but I think it's now time to, oops, yes, it is, to move to the first panel of the day. So, so if the panelists could take their seats while I'm introducing the panel. So this panel is the first panel of our conference, is organized around the theme AI, Open Science, and the Global Digital Divide. As detailed in the concept note of the conference, this is all available online. Also, a small note, all PowerPoints are going to be available online. So just keep that in mind. You will have access to them after the conference as well. So the Global Digital Compact, which is actually a component of the Pact for the Future, and I hope this is not confusing anyone. We talk about the Pact for the Future. It's the latest UN policy that has reached a consensus among 193 member states in New York, September 2024. It includes two components, the Global Digital Compact and the Declaration of Future Generations. So the Global Digital Compact recognizes an urgent need for inclusive access and address the potential impact, opportunities, and risks of artificial intelligence systems on sustainable development and the well-being and rights of individuals. For this panel, I would like to introduce our moderator, who will take the floor and the baton over from me. This is Mr. Nick Shockey. Mr. Nick Shockey serves as SPARC's Associate Executive Director. SPARC is the Scholarly Publishing Association and Research Coalition. Mr. Shockey, since joining SPARC in 2009, his role within the organization has evolved. A thorough line in this work has been connecting the people within institutions and supporting them in identifying and pursuing where they can contribute to advanced knowledge sharing. Nick's efforts have helped to develop the next generation of leaders within SPARC's issue areas. He led the launch of SPARC's OpenCon community, which brought together over 10,000 early career leaders across 5 global conferences, and more than 100 satellite events in 44 countries. Nick is responsible for a wide variety of programs to support SPARC members and for identifying emerging strategic areas where SPARC can be a catalyst for action. Over his 15 years at the organization, Nick has been deeply involved in SPARC's policy efforts, which have helped to deliver landmark federal policy in the United States, opening up access to publicly funded research. Nick serves on the governance bodies on a variety of organizations and projects, including OA Works, the Budapest Open Access Initiative, and ONIL, Open Negotiation Education for Academic Libraries. I also want to say that Nick serves as a shadow partner of the Dag Hammarskjöld Library since 2018 as well. So the floor over to you, Nick.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Thanos. And before we begin, I just want to express my deep appreciation to the United Nations Dag Hammarskjöld Library team and the team here at United Nations University for organizing this event. As a member of the advisory committee, I've seen just how much effort has gone to bringing this conference to what it is today, so much of it behind the scenes. And so just really appreciate that work in bringing us all together. Thank you so much. Also want to extend a particular welcome to the students and early career researchers, early career academic professionals, librarians that are here in the room with us, as well as joining online. And if you're an early career researcher or student, I just ask if you could raise your hand right now. It's a great proportion of the room. And I hope those, that are more established in your careers, looked around and saw those early career folks. And during, the coffee breaks, during meals, we'll seek out conversations with, the students and early career researchers, early career academic professionals that are here, that really represent core of this work and really, hold so much of the, sort of heart of whether this will be, our efforts will be successful. And also really appreciate the foundational support that enabled the participation of so many of the early career researchers that have traveled to be here in Tokyo with us today. So, as Thanos said, this first panel will explore the human experiences and unintended consequences of AI systems embedded in open science infrastructures. And our fantastic panel here will touch on both the opportunities presented by open science and AI in addressing the global digital divide, as well as the real risks that we must navigate in doing so, both in technical systems themselves, as well as related to the data that they use. And related to this theme, last year, the United Nations Library hosted a wonderful event on the right to read without being read. Great title, by the way. That really highlighted the increasing erosion of privacy in academic systems and academic infrastructure, and the risks that that poses to researchers, to the general public, and to research itself ultimately. And that event highlighted, that people really shouldn't be put in the position of having to trade one human right in the right to privacy, for another human right in the right to access or share knowledge. And so, with our fantastic speakers today, I'm really excited for this conversation that we'll have about the need to develop systems for open science and AI, develop them responsibly and critically. And discuss where each can advance equity, as well as where the use of AI or the use of open licensing may undermine the end goals that we're working toward. So I will introduce each of our speakers individually as each prepares to take the floor, and with their permission, and much to my embarrassment now that I've had such a nice long intro, I will give a short intro for each just to maximize the amount of time that we all have together for presentations and for conversation. But please do utilize the conference website for more background information on each of our panelists today. And then for you all, our audience, I will also just note as our speakers are presenting, please note down any questions that come to mind. We should have at least 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A after presentations, and want to have an active two-way conversation with everyone in the room. So with that, I will introduce our first speaker, Asmelash Hadgu, who is the co-founder and chief technology officer of Lesan AI and a fellow at the Distributed AI Research Institute, or DARE. Please take the floor.
Perfect. Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because I believe we're also joined by people all across the world online. It's a special honor for me to be here today and to talk about this topic that's close to heart personally, but also very important professionally at the crossroads of AI, open science, and global digital divide. My focus would be to reclaim open science as a force for equitable participation in AI. But before I delve into the topic, I would like to start with a short personal story. Over a decade ago, as an undergraduate student at Magala Institute of Technology in Tigray, Ethiopia, I had a mentor, a Japanese volunteer by the name of Yuji Doi. His computer was everything in Japanese, and he inspired my undergraduate thesis. My goal was for me to see a similar kind of system in my languages. And so we started off this ambitious project to make essential software accessible in our local languages. This would have been impossible with proprietary software, as you know, but because the softwares we chose, Ubuntu, OpenOffice, and Firefox, were all open source, we could just access the code, understand how it worked, and adapt it to the needs of our community. This wasn't just a technical exercise. It was an act of community empowerment that made it possible by the principles of open source. The early experiences I had became a foundational part of my journey. It's a perfect microcosm of the promise of open science. It's just not about the free code. It's about the ability for anyone, anywhere, to tap into the shared human knowledge, build upon it, and contribute back. This idea of inclusive, equitable access is what we're here to talk about. Now, let's shift gears a bit and see how this ideal holds up in the age of artificial intelligence. So fast forward to today, I'm building Lesan AI, and at Lesan AI, we're building language AI technologies such as machine translation and automatic speech recognition systems for languages in Africa, starting with my native language of Tigrinya. Our philosophy for building AI systems is fundamentally different from the dominant approach. Instead of indiscriminately web scraping, we focus on curating high-quality data sets to solve specific problems. We work with community members because we know that language is much more than the text and audio you scrape on the web. It's identity, it's culture, it's dialect, and it has nuance. And crucially, we believe in ethical way of data sourcing and fair compensation, rejecting labor exploitation, which is rampant in the AI industry. So practicing open science means contributing back. For us, this is what we created and released, Horn Empty, a benchmark dataset for 5 languages in the Horn of Africa. High-quality benchmarks are essential for a healthy scientific ecosystem. They allow researchers, both locally and globally at academia and industry, to evaluate models transparently and push the fields forward for these languages. And this is an example of open science in action, creating shared resources to empower everyone. But as we've been working to build this community-centered ecosystem, we've encountered a massive challenge. The very principles we cherish are being hijacked. Big tech companies are using the language of openness not to empower, but to dominate. It has become a marketing tool that obscures harmful practices and creates an illusion of progress. Let me give you a concrete example of this. The No Language Left Behind, or NLLB project from Meta, a single AI model that translates between 200 languages. That's close to 40,000 pairs. They claim this is a breakthrough high-quality machine translation supporting 55 African languages. We examined the quality of the training data, the evaluation data sets, and the model performance of Meta's No Language Left Behind project. And we found a significant portion of the training data is synthetic, that's not human-generated. Evaluation data sets are mixed into training data to inflate results, and the overall model quality is lower than reported. So how companies violate the core of ethos of open science is big to least, but I want to tie them a bit to the kind of attributes that were described from the UNESCO definition values. And this is not just for Meta. Meta is a concrete example. And to their credit, we were able to do this because they open sourced part of the things. And what we found were, for example, on scientific integrity, using evaluation dataset in training dataset to inflate results. That's not scientific integrity. And lack of attribution. For example, even though we mentioned this open source dataset, the Horn MT that I mentioned earlier, was used in this, it was not mentioned in any of the documentation. We discovered it ourselves on their GitHub repo. And problematic licensing. They build models on data they don't even have license for. For example, in this particular case, JW300, then they redistribute, they restrict commercial use of these models that they use for commercial purposes for themselves. So the consequence is a vicious circle that widens the digital divide. Big tech releases overhyped open models. The results become the de facto standard, even if they are subpar quality. Local innovators are forced to release their data. Big tech companies reuse this data, reinforcing control. In summary, this is not open science. It's enclosure disguised as openness. So what's the path forward? We cannot abandon open science. In fact, it's our most powerful tool for critic. It's because of these open science principles that we were able to audit Meta's models. The solution is to reclaim its meaning. We must demand more than just a license. We must look beyond the hype. We must demand attribution, fair collaboration, and ethical practices. Funders, especially in African AI, must create policies that help local ecosystems become sustainable, not just sources of data for Silicon Valley. For our part at Lesan, we're partnering with similar grassroots movements and companies to create a federation of startups that we call the Huniki Federation. So my journey began with empowering experience of using open source to serve my community. That's the promise we must fight for. Open science can be the single greatest force for closing the global digital divide, but only if we practice it authentically. Let's work together to ensure that the future of technology, especially AI, is not dictated by a few, but is co-created with and for all of humanity. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Next, we will hear from Jane Andrew, who is a professor of accounting and head of the discipline of accounting governance and regulation at the University of Sydney's Business School, as well as co-editor in chief of the journal Critical Perspectives in Accounting, which is the role in which I first met Jane, I think a couple of years ago. So Jane, please take the floor.
So thank you. I'm hugely grateful for the opportunity to be here and speak. And I also want to thank all the people involved in the organisation, because clearly it is quite an extraordinary event to put on. And while it's an honour to make a few comments, I'm actually most excited to be here to hear from you, because as you heard from Nick, I'm sort of discipline adjacent, perhaps, would be a generous read on my expertise in accounting. So I want to focus my comments on three interconnected themes that speak to what I see as the growing impact of artificial intelligence on research. First of those is why open science and the academic freedom that underpins it are increasingly tested by the rise of AI-driven infrastructures. And second, the responsibility of research leaders to help scholars understand how publishing systems and emerging technologies shape what knowledge is produced, shared and valued. And then third, how artificial intelligence is transforming the infrastructures of publishing and research evaluation, and what that means for the future of knowledge. And I speak from two vantage points, and as Nick's pointed out, I'm an accounting academic. I'm actually an interdisciplinary accounting academic, and I'm interested in the ways in which accounting information shapes governance and society. And I'm also an editor. And I work in both community-driven publishing ecosystems and also with commercial multinational publishers. And, you know, it is unusual for an accounting academic to be invited into a conversation like this. So thank you, Nick, and also to Leslie Chan for connecting us to this broader community. But accounting at its core is about measurement, classification, valuation, and communication. And these practices do more than record reality, they shape it. And for all of its appearances of neutrality, accounting is never passive. It actively directs resources, authority, and recognition towards some priorities and away from others. And those dynamics play out in our systems of knowledge production and dissemination. So to my mind, the need for open science has never been greater, yet openness alone is not enough without freedom of expression, which we heard to some extent from all of the people who introduced this conference. And without strong independent institutions, inclusiveness, accessibility, and integrity of knowledge are profoundly compromised. And across the world, scholars are facing pressure on that freedom, and many are experiencing intimidation, silencing, and retribution. And these pressures are not only political, they are also technological. So because of AI, increasingly mediates what is published, cited, and made visible. And through those practices, it quietly reshapes the boundaries of academic freedom itself. So even when there are commitments to academic freedom, of which my institution, I'm fortunate enough to work at, has, the infrastructures we rely on, from the submissions portals to indexing systems, can become instruments of control. And when those infrastructures are governed by algorithms that are invisible to us, even robust institutions become incredibly vulnerable. So, really what I'm trying to do with some of the work that we're doing at the Journal is to complement the remarkable work that many people are doing in terms of building infrastructures for open science by emphasising the growing influence of AI within the publishing platforms that mediate editorial judgment, from my perspective as an editor, and shape the governance of research. Because without a better understanding of how research practices intersect with publishing ecosystems and its technologies and its scholarly communities, even the best designed systems cannot create the conditions for openness. And AI makes this ever more urgent because it's not only having an impact on research methods, it's transforming editorial management systems. And what strikes me most when I talk about publishing in my own research community is how few academics actually understand how the system works. I know for many of this room, you live and breathe this, but every time I speak to colleagues, most are genuinely shocked. Very few have turned their minds to the ways in which their own labour is recruited for free in the dominant publishing model. There's a lack of understanding that leaves our community deeply exposed to the risks of AI. Because if we don't actually understand even the basics of how publishing platforms function, we cannot begin to grasp how automation and data analytics are transforming them. So my co-editors and I have committed to creating spaces at conferences, workshops and symposia to talk about what openness and knowledge equity might mean, how paywalls actually function, and who can and cannot access or contribute to the knowledge we produce. We also talk about the expanding role of AI in those systems, what data it draws on, who owns the data, how decisions are made, and so on. And despite the interdisciplinarity of the researchers in my field, most are shocked to learn that article processing charges can be tens of thousands of dollars. Few have any idea what the difference between gold, green and diamond open access actually is. And many have never read the publishing agreements they sign. And very few have thought about how the work they do as researchers can become gated once published. And so along with this, now a new force is shaping and reshaping research and how it's managed and judged in artificial intelligence. And it is increasingly embedded in the manuscript management platforms that govern much of the academic work. So as editors, we are told this offers great promise. It lowers barriers for multilingual scholars to improve accessibility and to reduce administrative burdens. We're also told that AI will lighten our workload, speed up decisions and assist with reviewer selection, which is undoubtedly the most sensitive step in the life of research. But behind the scenes, new features appear without discussion with us as editors. And for the most part, we learn about them completely by accident. So across the publishing ecosystem, AI is already being used to desk reject manuscripts, flag plagiarism, and accelerate review. And while these tools can look very efficient, they can also disrupt scholarly communities, and they can disadvantage multilingual authors, and they can deepen existing inequities. Their operation is largely invisible to authors, reviewers, and even to us as editors. It has introduced a new form of opacity that demands public scrutiny and clear rules of governance. But when researchers know so little about the basics of publishing work, it is easy for AI's hidden interventions to go unnoticed and unchallenged. So as an editor, I've seen these interventions firsthand. Our editorial platforms now offer reviewer recommender tools that rank potential reviewers using metadata. Publication count, citation indexes, H indexes, keywords, and even editorial board membership. So on the surface, it seems helpful, but in practice, it nudges us towards standardized judgment, and it is likely to de-skill editors by shifting them from making decisions to simply executing them. For the most part, this is framed as a neutral form of efficiency, even a relief from human bias. But algorithms are human artifacts, as we all know, and AI acts as a registry of power. And unless we make that bias visible, we risk institutionalizing past prejudices at scale. This is especially important as publishers transition their models into analytics, where every click we make as authors, reviewers, or editors becomes training data to predict and shape what gets written, who is deemed efficient, and who is identified as an expert. At Critical Perspectives in Accounting, which is the journal that I edit, we're experimenting with small ways to unsettle this process. So one example is that at our journal, authors can now submit their manuscript and be reviewed in their primary language. It is only after acceptance of the paper is it translated into English, and then both versions are published side by side. It's fragile, it's volunteer-driven, and it is limited in scale, but it preserves nuance and shows that alternatives can be built. Our wider community is also working to strengthen diamond access options for people participating in interdisciplinary accounting scholarship. And if we're serious about the right to participate in science, research communities really do have to invest in community-driven open access models. Editors of established journals like myself must also work with their publishers to expand what is possible inside commercial ecosystems. Because true openness depends on our willingness to treat knowledge as global commons, a shared human right, and to stay alert to how AI is reshaping the backstage of publishing so that efficiency does not become a new form of control. So realising all of these commitments means to us at Critical Perspectives defending vulnerable scholars, sustaining multilingual models, and ensuring that when AI plays a role, it advances equity rather than entrenching hierarchy. In practice for us, that means refusing automated desk rejections for so-called low-impact topics, resisting reviewer selection based on citation filters, inviting multilingual and early career reviewers, and advocating for a transparent and accountable governance model to be applied in AI in publishing. Because when AI becomes part of the infrastructure of knowledge, transparency is not only a technical requirement, but a matter of democracy. So in closing, it's important we think deeply about the politics of our time, because open science is about defending the right of all people in every country, every community, and every language to share in the benefits of knowledge. Thank you.
Great. Well, we now have at least 10, maybe 15 minutes. I'm back channeling with the organizers for questions. And there is a mic up here at the front for anybody that would like to ask a question. And so feel free to come on down. One heads up that I will give the panelists, because I should have let them know I do this in advance, is just in closing, I'd love to get your perspectives on sort of who's doing important research in this space that you might flag. I think, one of the great parts of these kinds of events, are the platform that they provide, and particularly in, sort of raising up other good work that's happening. And especially if you have any suggestions for early career folks who are doing important work, sort of raising that with this audience would be great at the end. So just a preview of a question that I'll ask later, but yeah, our first question from the audience.
Hi, thank you everybody for your presentations. I have a question for Jane. Thank you for sharing your experiences as a journal editor, and congratulations on the work you do. I have a question regarding the labor condition of editors, because I'm from Latin America, and in most of the journals that are run by universities, being an editor is rather a punishment than a rewarding labor. So what are your views on that? Because in that sense, AI can be helpful, as you mentioned. this statement about like obedience to the AI is very provocative, and I would like to know your views about these two things, right? Like labor conditions versus alliance with the AI.
I think it's such a good question. I am sad to share that this is exactly the same experience at the University of Sydney. And I think broadly, the role of editors and the workload associated with it isn't provided the space and capacity to do the kind of work that we're describing or trying to undertake at CPA. So then I can see why then AI becomes a very seductive resource. So I don't have an answer for this, but I think it's a profoundly important dilemma, and one that I think, at least in our community, we're trying to elevate so we can have the conversation, because up until quite recently, there hasn't been even basic conversations about the publishing ecosystem at all in my field. And, you know, I've also spoken out beyond my field around these questions and concerns, and I'm always surprised by the number of extremely senior academics have such limited understanding of the publication ecosystem. So I don't have an answer, but I think it's an important question.
Thank you. I have a question from online, which first thanks you for a wonderful set of presentations. Asking from a Global South perspective, are there any additional challenges faced by scientists in Africa, for example? Do individual organizations have the power to regulate, or do we require global cooperation to achieve this?
I mean, not partly. I did my undergrad in Ethiopia. I was part of the teaching staff for a year, so I think I understood a thing or two. When it comes to our technological or other futures in Africa, we don't have to rely, on the external. That's always, there's the push towards like externalizing things. And if what I presented makes a little bit sense, it's that in the AI race, for example, right? We're just ignored, like African languages, and that's just a small, still an important part of AI. Is you're just always afterthought, right? For companies, for researchers, right? Universities in the global north. And so the question to us, to you, is why can't we forge our own future? And we have to bring that on our own hands. And I guess that's my 5 cents towards that.
Thank you. Well, to close this out, again, recognizing, sort of the power of platforms like this, just wanted to, again, ask you all if, there are particular people whose work has been helpful, in each of the areas that you talked about, particularly any early career folks that might be doing important work in this area. And just briefly, I'll mention Rafaela Kunz, who's wrote a great article called The Digital Threat to Scientific Freedom. That's been a really helpful, piece of scholarship for me personally, but just curious if there are any other folks, whose work you'd lift up, here in this conversation.
Can I tell you what I thought of straight away, Nick? And that's your podcast, or the podcast that we were involved in from the Knowledge Equity Lab. I think they're brilliant. Like, I've listened to all of them, and they are really fantastic. So that would be my shout out, is they're great places to start and have exposure to a huge diversity of ideas. Yeah, so thanks.
Promise I had no idea that was going to happen.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Baba Sila. I'm from Embassy, Guinea, and Tokyo. I'm the counselor. Today, my question is, because when I'm here today, actually is for find out how to be, because my embassy today, listen to me what I'm talking about now. Okay, this is a very important today. The subject is so important. And my question is coming to how do we approach, how do we get a contact with you guys? If we look at it today in Africa, we have a lot of brilliant young kids who invent a lot of things. How do we get a contact with the UN? All of these inventions they were doing in Africa, who's now have a difficulty to be recognized or to be known by the UN or any other institution. We have a lot of people who created the medical sense, the technology sense, but they're still in the high end. What do the UN can do to discover or to find out, to make those bright leads so the world, because whatever they're doing, it can be helpful for the humanity. What is the contact with the UN for this kind of situation? I don't know if my question is clear, but I would like you to know. Actually, I'm trying to attract you from those who really have smart things to create it, but nobody know them. And nobody see them. What the UN can do by that? Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not 100%, but I think you mean about engagement, how like the bright minds of Africa can engage more with the UN. I think I'm happy to talk with you when we get off the stage very soon. But I think engagement with the UN has hundreds of fora like this one. So we make sure that we're available online. We make sure that wherever is possible, we can support people to travel here and come in participate. And Nick can speak more about that because SPARC has been doing that since the first time I met him. But before we go to that, and I'll be happy to discuss with you, I want to give the floor back to Nick so that we can close this panel. And then I'll invite you all for a 15-minute short break. But back to you, Nick.
Perfect. And also just to piggyback on that, mention there are a number of wonderful early career researchers from around the world that are participating in this event, including a number from Africa as well that I think it would be great to connect with while you're here. Sorry, I just want to give you both a chance for that closing question before we end, just about any other work that you would lift up, and then we can go to the break that Thanos mentioned.
Yeah, I think my final remark is sort of, AI, it's, at the heights of the bubble, if I may use. But for, people, hundreds of millions of people, especially from the geography I come from in Africa, these languages are not prioritized. And it's not because there's no talent, there's enough talent. It's just that the resources are not there. And I just would like to say, sort of like following open science principles, living by science and integrity is good, but it's also good to see the overall kind of landscape. In an unfair and unjust world, if you follow these principles blindly, you will probably be out of business if you're trying to create a sustainable business. And my message, especially for young people who kind of see the promises of like open science, but also want to contribute something good to society, is to carefully navigate this. Don't go away from open science. Those principles are noble, but be aware that the environment may not be conducive if your goal is, for example, to create a business, right, for your community, sustainable kind of venture, and so on. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for helping open the conference with your presentations, and I'll turn it back over to Thanos.
Thank you very much, Nick. My thanks also to the speakers. These are very insightful presentations and interventions, and we will make sure that certain parts of them are translated into the outcome document. Nick, I think the right moderator for the right panel. So, but I'm going to extend a little bit the program by 10 minutes because we are over our 10 minutes time. So I think now we have strictly 15 minutes to stretch our feet and move a little bit around. so that we can wake up a little bit before we move on to the next panel of the day. After that, there will be a longer coffee break, about 30 minutes, courtesy of IFLA. And then we will get with the keynote of the day. We made sure that the keynote is transferred towards the end of the day so that certain parts of our online registrants and certain, actually not parts, but certain people who are connecting from the Global South can directly tune in for the keynote. So 15 minutes break, and then we'll call the meeting to order again. Thank you.